Claudine Hemingway is a descendant of famed writer Ernest Hemingway. We bumped into each other at a party and decided to team up and dive deep into French history, but with a twist, by bringing a spotlight to those lesser known creatives in France. This is History with a Hemingway. Welcome back to Paris History Avec Hemingway. I'm back with Claudine, and today we're talking about more hidden secrets of the left bank of Paris. And I'll let Claudine take it from here.
Yeah. So the last 2 weeks, we've been sharing a few things on the right bank. But since I'm a left banker, my favorite ones will be the left bank, except for the things around the Louvre, of course. So in the left bank, you have all sorts of stuff. I kind of always think of the left bank as even the older part of Paris because you do have the Latin Quarter. You have that area that after they did the islands, it kind of came over here to the Latin Quarter, and just the things. I mean, all of Paris is really old, but the Saint Germain area specifically in Latin Quarter is pretty much all old. You don't have a lot of contemporary buildings, mixed in here and there like you do in a lot of the other neighborhoods of the city. But these are some of my favorites. And the first one I'm going to talk about is a thing that I had tried to find for years. Because around Europe, you could go into some cities, especially like in Germany, Austria, some of those cities, and the big, huge steel covers or grates they have like over sewer lines and stuff in cities.
Yeah, they have designs on them.
Yeah, so in all of those other cities, they have designs on them, and they'll even say, Nuremberg, and have some special design. But we don't really have that in Paris. They don't really do those. But when I was looking this up, and we're talking like 7 years ago, and I'm looking some of this up, and I was like, oh, what are these things? And I come across one that is a sewer grate, but it looks like a rose window from Notre Dame.
Oh, what is that about?
And I became obsessed with it. And I was Googling and searching and looking through everything I could find, could not find these for years. One day I'm walking through the beautiful Jardin des Plantes, which is over, kind of at the end, past the end of the Boulevard Saint-Germain. And I'm walking around and I look down and I was like, oh my gosh. And there it was in it right there in the garden. There's a whole bunch of them and they are basically for drainage. But if you look at them, they are done exactly like the rose windows of Notre Dame.
That is so wild. I love that you notice all these little details.
I love them. So they were created by the Jacquemin Fonderie, and they're just that's hard to find much more about them. I can't even find much about the actual company. Most of them were done well over 150, 60, 70 years ago. And sometimes you could also find them in courtyards of hotel particuliers or in buildings, and sometimes they're up on the wall and there's smaller versions of it, but they look like little rose windows, and sometimes you see it the actual grates in the courtyard. But other than the Jardin des Plantes, I have never seen them on the streets of Paris other than that.
It's the only one.
Yeah, and the Jardin des Plantes, I mean, we did a whole episode one time about it. It is really amazing. And if you, especially if you come to Paris in the spring or, in the autumn, or especially at the winter time, because they do a bunch of really cool stuff at the winter, it's really beautiful. And the Jardin des Plantes go all the way back to Henry IV and then Louis XIV. And you've got some amazing museums there. You have the Grande Galerie de Evolution there, and you have like the gemology building, and you have the other building that has like giant bones of a giant blue whale and all this other stuff. It's a really, really cool place. Great place to take kids, great place to walk around. And they also have the oldest iron structure in the world, older than the Eiffel Tower.
No way. That's super cool.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place. I mean, I'm not that far. I'm probably a 15-minute walk to get there. But of course, I don't spend as much time there as I will want to. But if you go in the spring, they have like peony gardens, and these peonies are like, bigger than the size of your dog, Coco.
I don't believe it.
It's absolutely gorgeous. A beautiful place to go walk through. The wintertime, they do all of the blow up figures. Every year it's a little bit different. Last year was like insects, so it's a lot of times animals, and they're all lit up and blown up, and you could go through there in the winter. Usually starts in November, it goes all the way into January, I think. And that's a really cool thing to go see too, especially for kids.
Yeah, I know now we're on your turf, so you're really like more passionate about this side, I think.
I do. I know. Well, I love it. But I mean, all the stuff around the Louvre. I mean, you know me, I love all of it. But if you go from there, you go to Short Walk. But if you actually look right outside around the corner, when you leave the Jardin des Plantes, there on the wall is the only Wallace fountain that remains that was a wall fountain. And so we all know the Wallace fountains, you know, with the four caryatides, and they're in the Vert Wagon green that you see all over the city. He had actually a few other shapes. There was the one that you see in the gardens today. They're probably, you know, a little bit higher than knee level, and you could just push the spout and water comes out, like pour it out and pour it into your water bottle. Though that's one. There's also ones that are tall ones, like the ones with the caryatides, but with columns instead of the women. And then there's this one that is against a wall, but it doesn't actually have water coming out of it anymore. But it's the only one left that Wallace did that's there, and it's right around the corner. But if you walk out there and then you head towards Rue Mouffetard, which is, and then up to the Place de la Contrescarpe, which was where Hemingway lived right off of when they first came in 1922. But if you go down around the corner, down Rue d'Escar, and then to take a left on Rue Clovis, you go there and there is, or I'm sorry, a right. There is a huge section of the wall of Philippe Auguste that's sticking out. And it's the coolest thing to see because it's so deep. You know, it's a good, I think, like 5 feet thick. And it's just basically, they just cut it right there to create the street, but they left it there. And there's a plaque said it's part of, you know, the Philippe Auguste wall. But it's really, really cool to go and see what that was. You see some remains of the walls around the city, but that's the perfect example. And I pretty think the only one where you get to see how thick it actually is.
Yeah, I didn't even know it was like cut into the walls before. That's really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty cool. But that's on Rue Clovis, which is just ends up, and you go right up there, and you could pretty much take, this is one you could almost take with you and just walk around with. The gorgeous church that is Saint Etienne du Mont. Saint Etienne du Mont is up there at the top of the hill, the Monton Saint Geneviève, which is right behind the Pantheon. Inside of it is there's a few very beautiful things inside of this, but a lot of these people, everybody's going to know this church because of the Woody Allen film Midnight in Paris.
I always get confused about where that's located.
Yeah, this is one, and most people know it from the outside because of the steps, but when he filmed this and Gil is sitting on the steps waiting for, you know, midnight to come, you don't see that there's the Pantheon because they had him sitting kind of at an angle against the wall. So you don't really see that the Pantheon's in the background. So when I take people on walks around there and show them, they, you know, because of the context of how you're seeing it, it doesn't look the same. But I always encourage people to go inside the church because inside the church is amazing. In the middle of the church, in front of the choir, is a Jude screen, or sometimes called a rood screen, and is the last one in the city of Paris. Back quite a long time ago in the 16th, 17th, and 18th century, they had these Jude screens in between because it would basically, it was almost, a lot of them was actually just a wall cutting off the choir from the nave. And so they started taking all these down. I mean, Notre Dame had on Saint-Germain-l'Auxerrois, Saint-Eustache, Saint-Sulpice, all these churches had them, but they wanted to open it up. So they're basically opening the congregation up to each other. And so everybody started taking them down. There are pieces of the one from Saint-Germain-l'Auxerrois that you could find in the Louvre, and some of them you could actually find also in the Musée de Cluny. But this is the one that is the only one that remains, and it's amazing because it was carved out of marble, one giant piece of marble, and they carved it, but it has huge arches, so you could see all the way through it. So if you're sitting there and you're looking up at, you know, the priest, you could see all the way back into the choir. So that's kind of why this one was able to escape demolition. And then they did decide at one point maybe they would take it down, and the parish completely freaked out and said, you can't remove this. It has to stay there.
Well, it gave us something beautiful to look at today.
It is really beautiful. And when you look at it over the doors, there's angels there. And the angels at one point were holding like crosses and instruments of the Passion, but they changed it with the Revolution. They changed it so they're holding up like palm leaves and olive branches, kind of trying to move it away from being about the church, even though it's inside of a church, but because they took all those churches and turned them into like, the Temple of Reason and everything. But it is pretty amazing to go see that. It's pretty jaw-dropping. The churches of Paris, every one of them is different, and each one has its own special thing in a way. And this is definitely one that you want to definitely check out. When I take people on tours of Saint-Germain, I take them into Saint-Étienne-du-Mont, Saint-Sulpice, and Saint-Germain-des-Prés, because all three are stunning and all three are very different.
Yeah, you definitely need to visit each of them.
Yeah. But in Saint-Étienne, you also have the actual relic of Saint Geneviève, who we did 2 podcast episodes back. I think it was like 2021 maybe. And she had her relics in there because originally, she was supposed to be in the Pantheon, and that was what she was built, what the Pantheon was built for. Then they kicked her out to put the dudes in there. And so her relics are in, a piece of her is in Saint-Étienne-du-Mont, and the chapel is amazing because the chapel is stained glass, and the stained glass tells her story. And it also tells the story of when they would do the procession, when Saint Marcel was down his relic was at Notre Dame, and they'd bring it all the way up the hill, basically knock on the door, ask Saint Geneviève to come out and play, and then turn around and walk back down and take her relics down to Notre Dame, do this big service. And they did this when there was, floods and famines and droughts, and the king was sick and all this, and they did it, well over 800 times over all the years until the revolution. And then that's when they tried to destroy her. But there were relics of her that had been sent around France. And so when those returned, they went into the church of Saint-Étienne-du-Mont.
That's fascinating. I don't know how you keep track of all this history.
Well, that's kind of what I spend all my time just reading about. But once I've talked about it so much, I remember it.
Yeah, that's the thing. I would not remember any of that.
Yeah, don't ask me what I did yesterday or what I ate for dinner a week ago. I won't even be able to tell you what I ate for dinner last night, but I can tell you all of these wonderful things. Another really fun thing is you leave the church and head down Rue Soufflot, take a ride on Rue Saint-Jacques. And on the Rue Saint-Jacques, going all the way down, was once the Cardo of Roman Lutetia. And this was basically, when they say the old thing about all roads lead to Rome, this road literally led to Rome. It's the north-south road that led to the Chemin de Saint-Jacques and the Santiago de Compostela. At number 27, Rue Saint-Jacques, if you look up at the corner, there is one of the over 120 sundials that they have in Paris. And this one is pretty cool because this one is the one by Salvador Dali.
Ooh, I love that. I have to go visit that. He's one of my favorites.
And it's in the shape of a scallop shell, which is perfect because Saint-Jacques. So if you ever have, the scallops, Saint-Jacques, that means it's the coquille Saint-Jacques. It means it's coming in the shell. And so one of my favorite places, Le Vent Comtois right now, because it's scallop season. They have a plethora of scallop shells stacked up every day that now they're using to put butter in and everything, because they're getting all these scallops that are coming in the shells. But this one was placed here on November 15th, 1966. Dali had it created for a friend that owned a shop beneath it. The sundial is a woman's face in the shape of a scallop shell, which is a nod to Saint-Jacques de Compostela. He has very blue eyes beneath his eyebrows set aflame like the sun. And his hair cascades down kind of with a very recognizable mustache like Dali had. Dali's signature is in the lower right-hand corner, but don't set your watch to it because apparently when he created it, it's never actually worked.
That's funny. It never even worked in the beginning.
I don't really understand sundials. I think maybe sundials worked way back when you didn't have buildings. And so I've seen them in when we talked last week about the obelisk being actually a sundial, I've never been able to be like, oh, is that so that's casting a shadow? So it's, 3 p.m. I've never been able to figure it out.
Me either. Somebody please help us.
But I'm sure it's because there's so many buildings and trees now in the way.
I'm sure that's what it is. The sun is not reaching correctly.
No. So now you want to go back up the hill a tiny bit and go to the Jardin de Luxembourg, one of my favorites. In here, there's over 107 statues that line the entire gardens that were originally created by Marie de Medici, then added to by Louis Philippe. The tree lined paths, sometimes there's little statues mixed in with there. And one of my favorites is there. We, of course, have the 20 statues of the illustrious women in French history, but which we've talked about many times. But what my favorite things is just off the side of that, and it's called the Le Marchand de Masque by Zachary Ostruc, who was a student of and he had created this one of this young boy that was a mask seller. And in his hand, he holds the mask of the French novelist Victor Hugo. And at his feet are the faces of eight of the greatest French artists, authors, and musicians. You look down, you can see Jean Baptiste Camille Corot. You see novelist Alexandre Dumas, composer Hector Berlioz, sculptor Jean Baptiste Carpeau, operatic baritone Jean Baptiste Fauré, Balzac, of course, novelist Jules Barbie d'Aurevilly, and my personal favorite, guess who?
I think I have a few guesses.
It is hard. Delacroix.
Of course, but you love so many.
Of course, I know it is hard to say, to narrow down my favorites. He used to be holding in his hand, he's holding up the mask of Victor Hugo, but below that, there used to be three more masks that hung down in his hand, and those were stolen. We've never seen them again. But it's really cool to see it. I love this one. It's off on a kind of a side aisle if you want to head back out to like Rue de Medicis. But it's a really, really cool one. And it's really fun to go there and look at all the faces. It took me a long time to figure out who all the faces were, because some of them, like Balzac and Delacroix, of course, and Dumas are very recognizable. Some of the other ones were hard. And some of those other ones that I've mentioned, like some of the authors and composers, there's not a lot known about them. I mean, not like on the level of Victor Hugo and Delacroix. And so some like sources I was finding, they were like, well, this one might be. So it was like, why can't we just have all this? So I had to spend hours to figure it out.
And that's why we love you. You can do the research the other people can't.
Yeah. But if you walk through, you walk through the garden, of course, there's the amazing Luxembourg chairs there. But walk through the garden to the Rue Saint-Sulpice. On your right is the largest church of the left bank, and only a tad bit smaller than Notre Dame. But when you walk in the shadows of the church, look to the left on Saint-Sulpice at route number 36. Above the door is an address, but it's a bit fancier than any of the numbers on the street. Why such a lovely number, you might wonder? Because it was a way for them to note that it was a maison close during the Belle Epoque. And a maison close is a fancy way of saying a brothel.
Well, that sounds so much fancier.
I know, doesn't it? But it means like, the maison close. It's along that street, there was a lot of them. And I just was talking to somebody about this last night and laughing about it, because here it is, the Rue Saint-Sulpice. Rue Saint-Sulpice is basically the separation between the Abbey and Church of Saint-Sulpice and the Abbey and Church of Saint-Germain-des-Prés. But lining that street was a whole bunch of different, like Dolly Parton, the best little whorehouses.
Gotta love Dolly.
I gotta love the best little whorehouse in Texas. I remember seeing that, I think, in the theater, and looking back, I was like, that was so not an appropriate thing to see at the time.
With your parents.
But I do love Dolly Parton. But they'd have these buildings, and number 36 was Miss Betty's. And it is a very narrow building. It's basically the width of like a window. And she had different floors on it. And so different floors had different things. So you might have a floor that was dedicated to, S&M. And you might have its floor that was dedicated where it was like very, ritualistic and Catholic, and very much things that you'd see in the church. And you had all these things, and they did this, and they were kind of dedicated to the priests and the members of the church.
That is crazy.
It is a little crazy.
Every level.
But if you go around the city in certain areas where there were these brothels, this was the sign of it. So at this one at number 36, the number's a little bigger, and it's painted, and it's really pretty, and has like flowers around it. And that is because that was its way of denoting that this is a maison close, without actually obviously having a sign on it. People would just know to keep an eye out for these larger numbers that were a little fancier.
It's so interesting. I love that.
Isn't that neat? along the way, if we go, there's also the story across the way over at, when we've talked about Palais Royale and how it was once, for a while it was prostitution and gambling and all of the fun things that they would have over there. But if you stay over here on the left bank and Mr. Napoleon Bonaparte comes into play again, just like he did in the Palais Royal, there's a restaurant called Le Procope in Saint-Germain. It's on the Rue Ancien Comédie. And it's just right there, leads right into Boulevard Saint-Germain in the Mint District, the Moni. And this is a really cool one. It dates back to 1686. They like to say they are the oldest restaurant in Paris, and everybody else calls them that, but it's really not the truth, because when it opened in 1686, it was basically like what you would think of as a 7-Eleven in America. It was a place for them to stop, have get the horses, could get some hay, have something to eat, and then they would have some coffee and keep going on their way.
I love it. You can tell them you guys are just the 7-Eleven.
It was a 7-Eleven. And then for a long time it had nothing in there. So it's kind of like I think it's a very gray area, if you want to call it the oldest one. And the other one is the Tour d'Argent. They tried to say they're the oldest too, but that's nobody could actually find how the date they're using is in the 16th century. And everybody's like, it's not even, it wasn't even possible. But if you go to Procope, go in there, make a reservation. I have eaten there twice. I thought it was actually pretty good. I actually avoided it for a long time because I thought it was maybe a little too touristic, and which means it's expensive and the food's not very good. And I went one day for lunch and it was actually really great. But do go in there and have lunch. And then that way just say, oh, I need to use the restroom. And then just wander around, because in the restaurant in 1795, General Napoleon was in Paris and he went there to dinner at the Procope. At the end of the meal, he didn't have enough money to cover his bills, so he left his hat as collateral in good faith, saying he would come back and return to get his hat and bring the money. And he never came back, and the hat is still on display in the restaurant.
What?
Yeah, so Napoleon's hat is there. It used to be in a glass case right inside the doorway, and they moved it because so many people were coming in there just to see that and blocking up the entrance. So they moved it upstairs. And so that's why it's perfect. Go in there and have lunch and then use the restroom. And when you're upstairs, just wander around, because all of these rooms, the stuff on the wall is amazing, has all of this history. It's super, super cool. And it's right there. It's on the back side of it. That's on the little passageway, the Commerce des Arts. It's got the prettiest little tiny terrace with these blue and red striped, French Parisian chairs. It's really, really adorable. I think, some people are saying now that they don't think the food's very good. The last time I did eat there was probably over a year ago, but I thought I didn't think it was too bad at all. I had like the lunch special, and it was, I don't remember what it was, but it was very French. And I thought it was pretty good.
Well, there you go, guys. Check it out. I went there years ago. I thought it was fine. It was nothing extraordinary, but it's
fun to see all the history in there. But if you're in the back in the Cour de Commerce, if you look up pretty much right above the restaurant to the right a little bit, that street alone has a huge history. The Joseph Guillotine practiced his machine there, chopping the heads off of sheep in the street. You could walk really basically on the cobblestones that he was right there. Georges Danton lived there, and then also Jean-Paul Marat lived there. He had his printing house there, so he'd go in there and work. Marat, you might know from the very famous painting by Jacques-Louis David that's in the Louvre, because he was killed in his bathtub. Marat had a skin condition, and he was more comfortable actually soaking in the water. And so he would basically have this little like makeshift desk set up, and he would be laying in the bath and writing. And that's how he was killed, because this woman, Charlotte Corday, came in and decided she was going to kill him. She snuck into his apartment, stabbed him to death in the bath. And that's what's depicted in David's painting. But he used this little office here as to write, and his printing house was in the Cour de Commerce. And so he would finish something and he'd reach out his window, and there was a little brass bell, and he'd ring this brass bell, and they would know to come up there in the middle of the night, get his writings, take it back down so they could publish it. And today that bell is still there.
See, there's so much to check out, guys. Now that you know these things, you can wander over there.
It's so cool. And I just always see those kinds of things, and I'm like, I wonder if the people that live there know what that is.
I'm guessing not.
Probably not. Probably not. I mean, hopefully, maybe the people that originally owned it left a story or something. But our last little fun thing is down, go from there, head on down and go to the Rue Bonaparte, and then which is a couple streets away, one street, two streets away. And just off the Seine is where the École des Beaux-Arts is. It dates back to 1648 when Cardinal Mazarin set up the school to educate the cream of the crop of French students in painting, sculpture, and architecture. Louis XIV used the school to handpick talent to decorate his ever-growing Versailles. Later, Degas, Ingres, Moreau, Renoir, Géricault, Sisley, and, of course, Delacroix all attended this prestigious school. It's still an active school today and holds many special exhibits, which is great to go see. If there is a special exhibit, sometimes it's like a student one. It could be really contemporary. And maybe if that's not really your jam, just go in anyway, because it's a great way to be able to just wander around and look at everything. It's fantastic. That special weekend in September, you could really go in there and you could walk around into the big auditorium and see everything. In there, they have in this church. So there was this church that was going to be destroyed in the south of France, and they decided to take it apart stone by stone and actually move the whole thing. And they put it here in the courtyard of the École des Beaux-Arts. And in it, there are copies of some of the most famous tombs of the Basilique Saint Denis. You have a copy of Michelangelo's Pietà that's over in Rome. You have all of these really cool pieces because they made these copies so the students could use them, to sketch and to learn. So you
I
have these
That is so
in it.
good though. That's like such a great idea.
It is really cool. And I'm not very far from there, so I walk by it all the time. And sometimes whenever there's anything going on, I just pop my head in there and go check it out. They've been doing more. There's kind of an event space, exhibition space that's on the K side of it. And this recently, just this last week, they had a very short run. It was about 2 weeks, maybe 10 days, 2 weeks. It was all about the J'adore Dior perfume. And it was about the creation of the perfume and the bottle, and how another one of my favorites, Jean-Michel Autignel, designed a bottle for it. It was really cool. They're starting to do a few more exhibits, and a lot of it's usually about sketches and drawings, which is really cool. But you still see kids, students there today that are studying, and all the time I see people going down the street with their huge, carrying their huge portfolios, always wondering what's inside of them.
Well, I think we definitely discovered a lot of your favorite side today. And guys, make sure you head over to ClaudineHemingway.com to learn more, check out her pictures, her tours, her travel planning, and tune in next week. Thanks for listening today, guys. If you're interested in learning more about Claudine, her tours, history, and the beautiful photographs that she posts all over Instagram, tune into her website, ClaudineHemingway.com.